December 23, 1945. Green Lake, Kandiyohi County, Minnesota. The ice groaned under the weight of a whole town. Kerosene lamps and truck headlights threw yellow pools over the lake, and in those circles, Americans in thick parkas and knitted red caps spun and laughed as though the war had never happened. Lise Weber, former Kriegsmarine signals clerk, 24, stood at the edge in a U.S. Army-issue pea coat 2 sizes too big, clutching a pair of scuffed figure skates whose leather was cracked white from other winters. The wind cut straight through the wool of her borrowed cap and burned her eyes. Somewhere behind her, on the bed of a 212-ton GMC truck, a portable U.S. Army radio hummed and popped, a male voice in Midwestern English warning that the temperature would drop below 0 after midnight and motorists should avoid county roads. She had never seen civilians and guards occupy the same winter, let alone the same ice. A U.S. sergeant in a dark Mackinaw, carbine slung but safety on, nodded toward the lake. "Go on, Fräulein Lise. Minnesotans skate, even in bad years." It was such a harmless sentence, and therefore shocking. In Kiel, before the raids, winter had been ration cards, sirens, and blackout curtains. Here it was, music spilling from a battery-powered phonograph and girls in wool skirts racing boys in hockey boots. Lisa stepped out. The blades wobbled, scraping the ice like dull knives. Children laughed, not cruelly, just surprised. She felt every eye from shore, every memory of the war sitting on her shoulders. "If stories like this still matter where you are," the sergeant added quietly, "tell us what country you're listening from." 7 weeks earlier, U.S. Army POW branch camp near Wilmar, Minnesota. 7 weeks earlier, the wind off the prairie came in low and mean, pushing powdery snow around the low fences of the branch camp. Lise stepped down from the back of the canvas-topped truck, ankles stiff from the long ride, and the cold took her breath as effectively as any shouted order. The earth was frozen to iron. The barracks, standard U.S. Army stock, tar-papered, with stovepipes, looked temporary, as if America could build a camp anywhere and make winter behave. A military policeman with a white helmet band checked the roster against the bundle of German names. "Weber, Lisa, Kriegsmarine, signals." His accent flattened her name, but he did not sneer. He pointed her toward a low building that smelled of coal smoke. "Day room there. Warm up." Inside, heat hit her cheeks. 6 or 7 of the other women were already there, red-fingered, stiff, their German coats pulled tight over American wool. What caught her first was the sound. A wooden boxed radio set on a crate, its dial glowing amber, playing not news of Europe, but a local announcer saying, in friendly English, "For those planning to be on the lakes this weekend, ice is holding fast. Dress warm, folks. Wind chill near. 0. She stood still, boots dripping melt on the floorboards. Lakes. Skating. The war was months over, and they were announcing pleasure like a weather warning. A U.S. sergeant in a Mackinaw saw where she was looking. "Keeps the towns out of trouble," he said, not unkindly. "You girls behave, you get library. Maybe town, too." Behave. Library. Town. He spoke of them as if they were still moldable. Outside, the wind shoved at the walls. Lisa listened to the radio a moment longer, trying to imagine a winter where people went onto the ice because they wanted to. It was a Saturday when they were driven through town for supplies and to let the women stretch their legs under escort. The snowplows had pushed high ridges up along the main street, so the U.S. Army truck moved slowly, chains clinking. Lisa sat on the bench in back, canvas flaps tied open just enough to let her see. Wilmar, or whatever this small settlement just outside the camp was, looked tidy even in deep winter. Storefronts squared to the road, a filling station, a cafe with fogged windows, and behind it, through the bare trees, a wide flat of white that could only be the lake. She heard it before she saw it clearly. The scrape of steel on ice, bursts of laughter, a man calling to a child to keep your knees bent. Then the truck eased past an opening where two guards climbed down and motioned the women to stand in a line by the road, hands visible, not wandering. From there, Lisa had a clean view. The lake was alive. Men in work coats and fur-lined caps skated in wide loops. Teenage girls in wool skirts and thick stockings chased after them, arms linked. A Navy man, probably a local boy home from the Pacific in dark peacoat and knit watch cap, was on the ice with a small child, letting her cling to his hands. No one seemed afraid of uniforms here. They belonged to the same winter. A church bell rang from up the slope, slow and resonant in the cold. At the edge of the ice, an older American woman spotted the line of German POWs and stiffened, her mouth tightening. She said something to the man beside her and looked away. Lisa swallowed. So they did see us. But the sound from the ice did not stop. Skates hissed, blades clicked, someone shouted that the ice was good and thick. Lisa watched the girls turn without fear of breaking through, and an ache, part longing, part humiliation, opened in her chest. Germany had had winters, but not like this, not in 1945. She glanced at the guard. He gave no sign. The town now knew there were German women here. That meant there would be talk, for or against. 2 days after the trip through town, the camp felt busier than usual. Trucks came and went. In the administration hut, a pot-bellied stove roared. The German women were told to wait in the day room. Lisa sat on the bench under the radio. Today it carried only farm reports and a warning of more snow, while the American sergeant from before spoke in low tones with a civilian woman in a dark wool coat. Her hat was plain, Lutheran plain, and her eyes were the quick, assessing kind of someone used to organizing suppers. Just for Christmas week, the sergeant was saying. Underguard, pastor says it's right. The woman glanced toward the German cluster and lowered her voice. Lise caught only, my sister's boy didn't come back from Belgium. It was like feeling a door close halfway. When the woman left, the sergeant tacked a single sheet of paper to the wall next to the radio. The English letters were neat, Army typed, approved, Community Skating Outing 23 DEC 45. Escorted, no wandering below it, a column of names, German names misspelled but recognizable. Weber, L, was fourth. For a second she simply stared. The radio popped, then settled into a Christmas jingle played on thin horns. Someone behind her, Frida from Hamburg, said sharply, so they will parade us like curiosities. Lisa didn't answer. The sergeant looked over. You ladies were decent in transit. You follow rules, you get a little human time. That's how it works. From the open door, winter light spilled in, along with another voice, older, female, cracked by cold and grief. I don't see why they get Christmas. My Carl doesn't. The words struck harder than the wind. Lisa kept her eyes on the paper, on her own name, and felt gratitude and guilt tangle until she could not tell them apart. Outside, the lake would freeze harder. Inside, a date was now fixed. She would have to stand on American ice and not fall. The camp pond was hardly more than a flooded depression that had frozen smooth under weeks of cold, then been scored by board boots and the blades of men who actually knew how to skate. That afternoon, the sky was a flat pewter, the kind that swallowed sound. 2 MPs stood nearby, collars up, rifles slung but muzzles down, watching more out of curiosity than suspicion. The camp corporal dumped a canvas sack on the snow, and out slid 6 pairs of skates, mismatched sizes, leather cracked, blades spotted with rust. Pick closest, he said. Don't say we never do nothing for you. Lisa picked a pair and sat on the low bench. The leather was stiff and smelled faintly of old liniment. She laced them over the thick army socks she'd been issued, fingers clumsy in the cold. When she stood, the world narrowed to two thin lines of steel. Her ankles wobbled. Behind her, one of the other Germans laughed once, quickly, covering it with a cough. She stepped onto the ice. It was like stepping onto glass with knives strapped to her feet. The pond's surface bore frozen ruts. Every time a blade caught one, her balance pitched. She windmilled her arms, jaw clenched, determined not to fall in front of the guards. The memory of the older American woman's voice, "They get Christmas," rang in her ears. She would not give these people a reason to say yes. They are ridiculous. Her right foot slipped sideways. The fall was coming. A gloved hand caught her elbow. "Easy. Knees bent. Don't stand so tall." The voice was American, youngish, patient. She looked up into the face of the same sergeant she'd seen near the radio. Name tape, Harris. "I can manage," she said in German-accented English. "I know," he answered, steadying her anyway. "But we don't need you busting an ankle before the 23rd. He guided her in a slow, ugly circle. The ice scraped under them. The cold bit their cheeks. And for the first time, the idea of being on that big, bright lake did not seem entirely impossible. That evening, the cold pressed so hard against the barracks windows that a film of frost feathered outward from the nail heads. The dayroom stove glowed orange, drying socks and gloves strung over a line. The women talked in Low German about home, about mothers in Schleswig, sisters in bombed Hamburg, a fiancé no one had heard from since the odor. Over them all, the radio murmured. It was an American voice, the kind trained to sound cheerful through static. "Overnight lows below zero, so bundle up if you're headed out early. Kandiyohi County roads are open, but watch drifting near the lake. Ice conditions remain good for skating." Lisa looked up from the mitten she was redarning. Good for skating. They said it like they would say, all clear. As if a whole county needed to know that their play would be safe. She glanced at the guards' table. One MP was reading a Minneapolis paper. The other was working a crossword. Neither was really listening. The radio was for atmosphere, for proving every evening that America had weather, sports, church news, dances, while the rest of the world dug itself out of rubble. "Any news of Europe?" one of the older German women asked in a whisper. Lisa shook her head. "Only corn prices." The announcer went on, shifting to a community calendar. "Lutheran Youth Choir meets Wednesday. Christmas program rehearsal. And don't forget the Sunday afternoon skate. Bring your own blades." Sunday skate. So it wasn't just once for Christmas. It was a rhythm. Her mind jumped forward to the 23rd. If the lake held now, it would hold then. The stove ticked. The windows filmed thicker. Lisa leaned closer to the radio's warm grill cloth, letting the English roll over her. This was how they did it. By making ordinary life louder than the war. By inviting even prisoners to overhear. She decided then she would not give them reason to cancel. Snow squeaked under boots on the church steps. The small white building in town doubled as everything. Sunday worship, weekday suppers, Red Cross sewing, now a meeting about what to do with the enemy women out at the army camp. Lisa was not allowed inside, but the truck that had brought 2 NCOs and the camp liaison was parked alongside, and with the door opening and closing, she caught pieces of English carried on cold air. "I said goodbye to him in 44, and now we're putting Germans on our lake." A woman's voice, flat with exhaustion. Inside, chairs scraped. Someone set down something heavy, a large metal coffee urn, on a table. Another voice, male, older. "They are prisoners, Mrs. Dalrymple, not guests, still under guard." "But they'll be seen," the first woman insisted, "like normal girls." Lisa stood near the truck, hands tucked into borrowed mittens, pretending to study the sky. Through the church basement windows, she saw yellow light in the shapes of coats. She could almost smell the coffee and baked things. A younger man spoke then. She recognized the cadence of a soldier who had actually served. "I saw what they did in the Ruhr. You ask me, they can stay behind the wire." Silence followed, heavy as the overcast. Then the pastor's voice, the one she had heard on the radio doing a Christmas message last week. "It is Advent. Charity is not for the deserving only, and we have an opportunity to show them how Americans keep Christmas. Under guard," he repeated, for the nervous, "but we do not diminish ourselves by being merciful." Footsteps, coats rustling, decision made. When the liaison came back out, he was pink-cheeked from the warmth. He saw Lise by the truck and switched to slower English. "It's on. You'll skate. Don't make me sorry." She nodded, throat tight. The door closed behind him, shutting away the widow who would not watch them. Mercy, here, would always have a shadow. The night before, the army was to take another group out to check the lake. The camp settled early. The sky was clear, the cold sharper than it had been in days. Snow squeaked like dry sand. Light leaked from the barracks windows in narrow yellow bands. Lisa had just come back from the latrine, boots crunching, when she heard her name. Weber. She turned. Sergeant Harris stood between two barracks, Mackinaw buttoned to the throat, cap pulled low. His breath came out in pale bursts. In one hand he held a bundle. "I saw you on the pond," he said. "You're fighting the boots more than the ice." She stiffened a little. "They were the only ones." "I know." He glanced toward the MPs at the gate, far enough not to hear, and unwrapped the bundle. A pair of white leather skates, scuffed but well kept, with blades that caught the starlight. On top of them, a thick gray wool cap with a turned-up brim. Not army issue. "My sister used these. We're done with them. They fit you. You keep your feet under you. And this," he held up the cap, "you wear it or you'll freeze your ears off out there. Minnesota doesn't care if you're German." She looked from the skates to his face. This wasn't policy. This was family, crossing a line to a prisoner. "Why?" she asked, the word small in the cold. "Because," he said, as if it were obvious, "if we're going to show you how we do Christmas, you ought to stay upright." Then lower, "And because some folks in town are still hurting, don't give them a show." The leather was warm from his hands. She took the skates and the cap, feeling the soft, dense wool. For a moment she saw not a guard, but a brother thinking of his sister on winter ice. "I will not fall," she said. "Good," Harris answered, stepping back into the dark. "See you on the lake." They took them out in the morning when the cold was hardest, the sky a pale, flat blue. The army truck drove straight down the packed path toward the lake, chains rattling, and then, this shocked Lise, it rolled out onto the ice itself. The tires made a deep, resonant thrum, as if the lake had a chest. 2 American men were already out there, parkas on, gloves off, working an ice auger through a hole. A coil of rope lay nearby, frosted white. Harris jumped down first, tested the surface with his boot, and waved the women out. "Stay near the truck. Ice is good." Good. The word did not match the hollow booming sounds traveling under her feet. Lisa laced the white skates he'd given her, fingers stiff, pulled the gray cap low over her ears, and stepped onto the broad, clean sheet. This was nothing like the camp pond. This was open, with lines of skate marks from Sunday, with the town visible up the slope. Houses, church, a dog barking. She pushed off. The better blades bit clean, no wobble. Cold air cut her throat. For a few seconds she simply glided, knees bent as Harris had taught, arms loose. Then from somewhere deeper in the lake, there came a sharp crack, ice adjusting to the cold, and every muscle in her body tensed. In Kiel, That sound had meant something rupturing, docks splintering after a raid. Her instinct was to scramble back to shore. But ahead of her, two American girls, teenagers in wool coats, hair under scarves, kept skating, laughing at the noise. One even tapped the ice with her blade as if to say, "We know you, Winter." Lise exhaled. She forced her weight back over the skates, matched their tempo, and circled. Harris watched from beside the truck, satisfied. She was not giving anyone a show, only proving she could belong to this ritual for an hour. When they called them back, her cheeks burned, eyes watering from the cold, legs shaking, not from failure, but from success. Steam from the wash basin fogged the lower part of the barracks window. Outside, the sky was a hard, starry black, the kind that promised even colder morning. Inside, under a single hanging bulb, the German women prepared as if for a visit to relatives, not for an escorted appearance before former enemies. Lisa sat on her bunk with the white skates across her lap, wiping the blades with a bit of rag so no rust would show. The gray cap Harris had given her lay beside her, thick and unfairly warm-looking. Across from her, Frida watched, jaw set. "He brings you gifts now?" Frida said quietly, in German. "Maybe he will take you to supper too." The remark stung because it echoed her own fear, that she would be seen as currying favor. Lisa set the skate down. "He brought them because he does not want us to fall," she said. "One of us falls, all of us become fools." Frida snorted, but her eyes dropped to the cap. Lisa hesitated only a moment, then held it out. "Wear it tomorrow on the truck. I can take it when we reach the lake." Frida looked up, surprised. The wool passed from one captive to another. The tension in the room loosened a fraction. At the far end, another woman was brushing her hair with a U.S. Army issue comb, trying to make it lie flat under a kerchief. Someone else scrubbed the POW stencil on her coat with soap, hoping to dull it. From the day room, through the open door, the radio played a carol. American voices singing about peace on earth. The guards had left it on for themselves, not for the prisoners, but the sound drifted in anyway. "We go as Germans," Lisa said, more to herself than to the others. "But we will not go as a circus." Frida tied her hair up and pulled the gray cap on. "Then stand straight," she said. "If we must learn their winter, we will learn it well." The next morning, the trucks would come. December 23rd came bright and hard. The trucks rattled them out of camp in 2 trips, tires chained, canvas flaps tied back so the women could see. Lisa sat beside Frida, now in the gray cap, hands tight on the white skates. Ahead, Green Lake opened like a sheet of glass dusted with snow. American cars were already parked along the shore. Townsfolk moved in dark clusters toward the ice. A phonograph on a crate was cranking out a carol, thin but jaunty. At the edge, an Army radio on the bed of a truck crackled. Temperature will fall rapidly after sunset. Motorists advised. The same tone she'd heard in the day room now belonged to this scene. Guards jumped down first, forming a loose cordon, not to pen them, she realized, but to make the townsfolk feel safe. "Go on, Fräulein Lisa. Minnesotans skate, even in bad years." Harris's voice was exactly as it had been that night, only now it carried for others to hear. A few Americans turned at his German address. Their expressions were cautious, not hostile. She sat on a wooden bench, laced the skates with fingers that shook from cold and nerves, pulled the cap back from Frida, and settled it over her own ears. Then she stood, stepped onto the lake. The ice sang under the weight of so many people. Children in red mittens darted past. A sailor home on leave spun his sweetheart. An older woman, the same one, Lisa thought, from the church, watched from the shore, lips thin but no longer protesting. Lise pushed off. The blades held. The practice on the camp pond. The trial run on this very lake, the steadying hand of an American sergeant, All of it converged. She wobbled once, arms out, and a small American girl skating near her giggled, not cruelly, but in shared surprise, and matched her awkward glide. Lisa found herself laughing, a short white cloud in the air. In that moment she understood. The ritual was the point. To show them winter could be for joy. To let a prisoner carry that memory home. On shore, Harris nodded, satisfied. The radio kept warning about the cold as if this happiness were a thing to be scheduled and protected. They herded everyone. Townsfolk first, POW women last, up the shoveled path to the church hall that overlooked the lake. Inside it was a different season. Windows steamed, coats piled on benches, pine boughs hung along the walls. Someone had set out folding tables with oilcloth. At the far end, 2 women ladled hot cocoa and coffee from big enamel pots. The phonograph from the lake had been brought in and now played slower carols. Lisa's cheeks still burned from the cold. Her calves ached pleasantly. She kept to the side with the other Germans, unsure how close they were meant to stand. An older American woman, recognizably the one who had objected at the church basement, sat at a table with 2 other widows, hands folded, eyes dark. She did not look at the prisoners. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then the pastor's wife, apron over her dress, hair pinned sensibly, picked up 2 steaming mugs and crossed the space. She set one in front of Lisa, one in front of Frida. "It's sweet," she said, simple, Midwestern. "Careful, it's hot." Lisa blinked. "Danke," she said before she could remember to use English. The woman only nodded and moved on to the widow's table. Frida lifted the mug. "Real cocoa," she murmured, surprised. Steam curled in the air, smelling of milk and sugar, things Germany did not have in that quantity anymore. In a corner, a few townspeople started singing Silent Night. The tune was the same as Stille Nacht, the German carol Lisa had known since childhood. Her throat tightened. Across the room, one of the widow's eyes shone, but she did not leave. They were all occupying the same warm December now, each with their dead. Lisa cupped the mug in both hands, letting the heat sink into her fingers. Today's ice, the laughter, the radio's warning, the girl who had giggled with her, all of it settled into place. Whatever orders came next, she had this. The orders came on a morning as clear and bitter as the one they had skated. A clerk in an army greatcoat posted a new sheet beside the dayroom radio. Names for transfer. 12 Jan 46. The list was long. Lise found her own midway down. Destination, East Coast holding, then repatriation. Around her, reactions scattered. One woman cried quietly from relief. Home, finally, even if it was rubble. Another scoffed, "Good, I am tired of their kindness." The camp itself seemed indifferent. Trucks still came, guards still rotated, the stove still needed coal. The radio was on, as always. Temperatures will moderate by Sunday, so families can look forward to good skating on area lakes. The announcer's unbothered cheerfulness cut straight through Lisa. Of course they would skate again, with or without prisoners, with or without a war. This was their winter, their rhythm. She stepped outside, Lys still pinched in her fingers. The sky over Minnesota was a wide, pale blue. Snow along the fence line glittered. Beyond the wire, she could see the frozen pond where she had first flailed and nearly fallen before Harris caught her. A guard walked past, nodded to her as if to any regular worker. "Looks like you're shipping out," he said. "Yes," she answered. "Home." He shrugged against the cold. "You got a bad one to go back to." "I know." She wanted to tell him that when the sirens had sounded in Kiel, no one had said, "Dress warm and have fun." That on their radios there had been orders, casualty counts, speeches. That this winter, of borrowed skates, of gray caps passed from woman to woman, of cocoa offered by a widow who could barely meet her eyes, would be the peace she would keep. Instead, she only said, "Thank you. For the ice?" He looked puzzled for a heartbeat, then smiled. "Sure. Minnesota's good for that." 2 weeks later, when the truck carried her away toward rail and ocean, the dayroom radio's voice trailed after her through the open door, still talking about lake conditions. She tucked the sound away, a proof that once, in the country of the enemy, joy had been public, scheduled, and shared.